Carl and Lou here from Brrraaains A Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial.com for sure. And it's Freddy's Nightmares, an episodic recap of the series. We're up to episode number 4, season 1, called Freddy's Tricks and Treats. His name's in the title, which means it must be an episode surrounding him. Remember, there are a lot of episodes that simply don't. Although, of course, it's always implied he has some influence here and there and so on. But some are more obvious than others. And this is a Freddy Krueger episode. It is very much the case. It's also a Halloween-themed episode. That's element of it set at the time. There's costume parties, you've got scares, that kind of thing as well. Written by A.L. Katz and Gil Adler and directed by Ken Wiederhorn. The cast, we have Mariska Hargitay as Marsha, Darren Dalton as Zach, Daniel McDonald as Mark, Cameron Thorpe as Gary, and Elsa Raven as Mrs. Wildman. Which she might be the most memorable character from this middling episode. Weirdly, a lot of people, when I looked online, seem to really like the first part, the medical student part and that aspect, over the second part, which is the dream analysis. Yeah. I think I like the dream analysis more than the first part, but I'm not entirely sure I think either are particularly special. Yeah, just because the overall... the character that bridges both, he just comes across as a creep. So it's kind of like everything he says just comes across as ugh. Oh, the one that connects from the first to the second. Right, okay, yeah. Well, this is a little different as well, is where, and I guess it's still early days, so it hasn't really set its kind of rule or score out yet, but the main character of the first segment is also in the second segment as well. Like, she's still a major part. She's still the star of the second segment. Yeah. It's not like she disappears. And then, like, the minor character from segment 1 steps into the main role of segment 2. That still happens, but she carries over into both. In fact, she comes out, spoilers, survives the entire ordeal. Yeah, she does. Yeah. And that's Marsha. We're talking about Marsha. She's a med student, basically, studying for a big exam. Maybe you can correct me there. I debated this. I said to you, is that likely to happen over the sort of Halloween period? Is that likely to happen? You seem to think that's a possibility it could. Yeah, because it's not an official holiday. But why does she appear to be the only one? And why is like nobody else? Like, I know it's like, oh, she cares more than others do and they want to party and have a good time. But like, Americans treat Halloween, as far as I'm aware, very different, like a big deal. I'm not sure an exam would be scheduled over a Halloween period. Particularly, it appears to be, if it's not Halloween night, it's very close to Halloween, and she's saying I've got an exam the next morning. Well, I think with Halloween, there's pretty large tribes in America that are very religious, so it's not an official holiday. And they just make a bigger deal of it. Are you American? Could you let us know if I'm right here? But basically, there's a party going on in our house. She's getting annoyed by it. She's getting annoyed by it. She's putting a noise cancelling 90s headphones. Yeah, she is as well. She's trying to do her work, but the noise downstairs is too much. Mark, her boyfriend, he turns up here. A little bit of a reference to another famous franchise, as he's wearing the Jason Hockey mask from Friday the 13th. Get used to Mark. He's a little bit annoying in this episode. He's one of those boyfriends who keeps wandering off and then going, "Nuh!" and trying to scare his girlfriend, even though, particularly there's a certain point which he's quite het up and quite stressed and he's still doing it, and you're like, dude, stop. Like that kind of thing. He kind of wants her to relax, come down, have a party and so on. She's like, no, not doing it. I'm going to go off to school. I'm going to do some late night studying there, late night business at the school. And on our way down through the party, we meet Zach, who's basically a minor character here, major player in the next part. Zach, he's a student, looks a lot older than a student. Alright, he's an adult student, let me rephrase that. He's a bit obsessed with dreams. We see him boring some girl with his analysis of dreams and stuff like that. But he just comes across as like, ugh. But I think he says can be taken as like, it's a bit... I think you're being a bit harsher now. I don't really get that. Part of that problem is how segment 2 opens, which kind of adds to that, but that never really comes anywhere afterwards, never comes back anyway. So Marsha, sticking with Marsha, she heads off to school to do some late night, what turns out to be cadaver dissection. I thought, again, I was like, that's odd. Like, would you be allowed to do that on your own late at night? No. Just a body there and just we couldn't even understand what the purpose was, because when we're watching her dissect this cadaver, effects aren't great. No. This elderly man, it's like, what is she actually doing it? We see her like cut a bit of skin off and then just sort of hold it up, and it's like, no. What is this study here? I could do that. Yeah. I am in no way medically trained in any way, cut or form, but can you cut a bit of flesh or skin off this body? I suspect I could probably manage it. Do you know what I mean? Like, so like, it's a bit odd in that. And then we meet the night watchman. He's on guard. And he tells about Freddy. Decides to tell about Freddy, particularly about the parents being responsible for his death. And I was kind of like, wait, that's just common knowledge now. Like, is that known? So all the parents got arrested. What happened to them? They got arrested. What? Like, it was odd that it was sort of common knowledge instead of it being like, if he'd said it as like, oh, the rumor is. He doesn't. He says it matter of factly. You know, she of course dismisses the story about Freddy, and that's it. That gets the ire of the Dream Man himself. He's like, oh, you're gonna believe in me, and so on. So he does set about tormenting her in the kind of cadaver room and stuff like that. Writes messages on her forehead. Kind of things. Makes sometimes it feel like it's dream. It's a good mix of dream and reality. We're not entirely sure what's real and what's not. There is a good mix of that, particularly when Mark gets involved, because Mark comes to visit her, scares her, and then there's that bit where he disappears, she follows him, goes down the hallway, and it's a skeleton, and it's Mark again scaring her, but then it reveals itself to be Freddy. But throughout this, where it does get interesting, and it's where it clearly wanted to tell a deeper, bigger story, is it ties back into she often dreams or remembers something from her past, which is the trauma of her grandmother. Her grandmother was a very conservative, religious woman who thought boys were dirty, that kind of thing. You know, we see her getting her hands scrubbed to the point of bloodiness as a child, as well as crazily bringing a boy back to the house when her grandma was out.
She freaks out and she comes back in.
And that obviously eventually leads to her kind of getting into a row with her grandmother dying of a heart attack, and Marsha's felt guilty ever since. I like that stuff. Do you know what I mean? There's not enough time here to really develop into it much more. And of course, Freddy would end up using that as a way to get to her. And then, like, we get this really weird end, because it kind of like, she's watching all that through the window. That's when she's outside and gone back to her family home. She's watching all that through the window. And then, like, Mark turns back up. And, like, it's like, this is a dream, isn't it? Right? It's a dream or something like that. And then he just disappears. And she sort of falls in the grass crying that Mark, don't leave me. And then about people from the party turn up.
Like,
and then they ask who Mark is. Like, who is Mark? And that's where that sort of ends. And we go into the next segment. And I don't really get it.
A bit abrupt.
I just don't get it.
No.
Like, was Mark not real then? Was it a figment of our imagination? And, like, okay, fair enough. I thought back and I was like, did he really interact with anyone at the party and stuff like that? Maybe the stress but it's like, there's stress and then there's imagining someone. And what I don't understand is, if that was the case, segment 2 should have perhaps utilised that. Because then we're doing dream stuff, and it's like, in segment 2, he just never existed.
No, and it's not the same boy. It's not the same boy that she's with at the house before the grandma comes in.
No. But then presumably she's supposed to be younger though, isn't she? That's what that is. Supposed to be probably more teenager than, you know, young adult than she is. But yes, I don't really get the end of that segment at all.
No.
And the second part then switches, and we follow Zach as he basically has enlisted Marsha into his dream studies. He has somehow, and hey, we got to take a pinch of salt with this, found a way to monitor brain patterns to record dreams on VHS as well. And it's like, okay, this is some pretty advanced technology. But he can only get it up to a certain point. When something traumatic happens in a dream,
the connection breaks.
The connection breaks. It gets fuzzy, and he can never quite see what's going on. And, you know, he kind of wants to push her further, much to his sort of student colleagues.
Stress.
Doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to do that. He thinks it might hurt her, upset her, and she's supposed to be a volunteer, not a test subject, and so on. This drove me nuts. Because, mate, even if you record 1 minute of a dream, you have done something that is insanely impossible. Yeah. Like, that is funding, research grants, you name it.
Yeah.
You are done. But he seems to be convinced that if he doesn't get the full picture of a dream to the end, then, like, it's all for nothing. Yeah. And it's bafflingly odd. Particularly as we do open in an odd way, as we open with Marsha basically slowly stripping off, as we see Zach and his colleague watching out of, through from the closet, but it's like dark around them. And don't get me wrong, there's no actual nudity here or anything like that. It's sort of implied as she takes off layers more than anything else, and it stops. The dream gets fuzzy before she takes her top off, that kind of thing. But that's them monitoring her dream. And I also then, being really nerdy about it, but I was a little bit bored by it, so I was kind of looking at things, but it's a little about the legalities as well. Like, all right, fair enough, she might have signed a waiver and stuff like that, but where does the line draw? And that is brought up later on. It is brought about at the line and stuff like that. But basically, Freddy's not left her alone. We can't. That's what I'm saying. This is more of a continuation rather than two segments that cross over.
Yeah.
Freddy's not leaving her alone. He's tormenting her in her dreams. She spends a lot of time in her dreams in the boiler room. That's where she ends up, including running into a little girl who appears behind a cage, one of Freddy's dream victims, so to speak. And in her dream, she's trying to rescue her more than anything else. And it's kind of slow.
Yeah.
Because all we're doing is her walk around the boiler room being... And here's the thing. Remember, this is Freddy... When we say tormenting, we mean like he stands and goes... Ha, 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 ha. She runs off.
There's not enough time
and that's what it is. Yeah. There's never really anything violent or happening. It's that kind of stuff where it's more just like, here I am, chase her, and then she runs away, and then to the next dream. Well, then Zach speaks about it, talks to her, talks about her trauma and stuff like that. Not the most interesting.
No, I find in quite a lot of these episodes so far, it's just there's a lot of I don't know. It just they don't.
They're not sticking?
No, they're not sticking. There's a lot of they don't have time, but what time they have, they waste on certain shots that are not great, and it's they're just lacking something. So I can see why this is a really limited kind of series.
Yeah, of course. It's
not got that kind of wow factor. Or should be. I think if you go and be camper. But yeah, I just find
in other episodes we do get campiness. You know, I know sometimes it wants to be serious, sometimes it wants, and I think it wants to take this quite seriously. Particularly as Zach decides to push her quite far. She's having quite a violent dream, and then we see that Zach is strangling her to try and push her to the point. You know, I'm not sure what his goal is here, but I guess he's become obsessed with it. But that's got the attention of Freddy, and he ends up in Marsha. She ends up dragging him into her dream. And something she acknowledged when she kind of wakes up, and then Freddy is there, and Freddy kills him. Well, we don't see any blood or anything. No. We see that Freddy's killed him, and in fact, we end up seeing that being replayed on a videotape. And well, there's some bloody evidence over and over. And that's it. That's how this one wraps up. And like I said, it's a mixed bag for me. I don't think there's anything particularly terrible, but I also don't think there's anything particularly great here either. Put it this way, this is our second go at doing this. This is how unmemorable a lot of this episode was, where it was like the first time we came to it, we left it too long to record. It was like, man, I'm struggling to remember a lot of this. So we were like, we all have to rewatch it and talk it again. Did a bit better in the second time, but this is my third time watching it through. And even then, like, I didn't remember it. Yeah. You know, whereas others, you know, there's other episodes I pointed at you and said, look, that episode's a banger. Yeah. I know it and stuff like that. Right, yeah. Freddy's Tricks and Treats was not the case. No. So, yeah. Got anything else to add?
No, I'd say I just found some of them this one was quite dragging.
Dry is the word. Dry is the word. Episode 4, Freddy's Tricks and Treats. Got any thoughts on it? Do you disagree with our opinion? You know what to do. Let us know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please help us out by giving us a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button. If you really liked what you saw, consider donating to keep the website and channel running by buying us a coffee via our coffee page or picking up some merch from our Big Cartel store. You can check us out on gbhbl.com as well as via our social media, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, as well as listen to our interviews via SoundCloud, Apple Music and Spotify. Just search for GBHBL. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?